Bet on Bears fans, another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast coming your way. Pat the designer, Courtney Cronin, live from Halas Hall. The players are in, the offseason workouts begin, and I'll tell you what, Jaylon Johnson's comments got me fired up. Tremaine Edmunds' comments got me fired up, and Darnell Wright did not want to be there. We got to hear from the players today. Want to hear Courtney's perspective on all of what was said during the press conference today. Feel like we got a lot of good insight into what Ben Johnson is trying to push as the message here. We'll talk about all that and more in today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Courtney, players are back. What's the mood up at Halas right now?
Encouraged. They all believe that they can win now, which for a team that has a new head coach who's coming in, who has a new quarterback that he's going to work with, and a roster that spent a lot of resources, money, draft capital, what have you, in free agency, that fits the bill. And that's the vibe that I think most of us walked away with today, feeling that these players, the four that we heard from, Jaylon Johnson, Tremaine Edmunds, Caleb Williams, and Darnell Wright, all now faces of this team, and all, some who have been faces of this team for a while. Like there's no time to waste. This is not going to be viewed as a gap year. It's not going to be viewed as the year to get things situated so they can be competitive in 2026. They feel that the roster that they have right now, the coaches that they have right now, of course, led by Ben Johnson, put them in a position to where this should be a year where expectations are at a high level. And even coming off a 5-12 year, that is how the Bears are approaching it. So a lot of normal stuff that you hear 2 days into the offseason program. And I do think hearing from Jaylon Johnson about not buying into the hype right now, like nobody wins anything in April. He's gone through this with new coaches, whether it's defensive coordinators or head coaches, a lot of different times in Chicago. Yeah. So I think to hear from anybody, he's probably the best one to be like, all right, pump the brakes on the enthusiasm, but you can still have some degree of it considering what this roster looks like and where the team feels like it's headed this season.
Yeah, very excited. We're going to get to all the comments, but first we do got to let you guys know Chicago Bears podcast is brought to you by the Advantage Dealer Group. Find your next Chevy, Toyota, or Acura and drive off in under 60 minutes or they'll make your first car payment. Also brought to you by the Hard Rock Casino in Northern Indiana. Las Vegas style gaming, just 30 minutes from Soldier Field, exit 6, right off I-80-94. All right, Courtney, let's start with the quarterback here, Caleb Williams. He's the one that everybody was most looking forward to hearing from, and Caleb always gives you something very interesting to take away from his press conferences. I thought it was very good to hear that Ben Johnson, it doesn't seem like, is giving Caleb the normal trial period of, hey, we're going to feel each other out and figure out kind of where each other stands on it. From what Caleb Williams said, Ben Johnson is already testing him on the things that he said in day one of showing up there as he walked into the quarterback room and basically said, okay, let's have a little quiz here. What is your takeaway from that? The fact that Ben Johnson is kind of foot to the floor already, as it seems, in his first couple of days here as the head coach.
Well, he's backing what he said last week at the owners' meetings when we talked about the schematic changes that Caleb is going to be immersed in over the next couple of months before the offseason. It starts now, but like when training camp comes, like you've got to be ready to hit the ground running with a roster that, hopefully for them takes shape in a form where, this is where, this is how far we have to go. This is what we feel confident in. And, so they're not fully into, the scheme changes just yet, but like they're going over stuff that Ben Johnson, at least enough tangible things that Ben Johnson felt comfortable giving them a pop quiz on Tuesday. And the way that Caleb described it is that Johnson flung the door open, made this grand entrance, and then got down to business with the quarterbacks. And, that's the position that Ben Johnson knows oh so well, being, the quarterback mind that he is, somebody who speaks the language, somebody who knows it is a quarterback-driven league. And to not waste any sort of time, to not slowly bring Caleb Williams along. When I talked to Ryan Poles last week, I had a one-on-one conversation with him in Palm Beach, and he mentioned, when I asked him about, are there any things that you, like expectations you had for how you were going to handle Caleb last year that maybe you felt you came short on or didn't hit the mark on? And it was the idea that and he couldn't really find the right word other than, babying the quarterback along, which sometimes you do for young, talented players because you don't want to throw too much at them. You want them to be the great version of themselves that they were in college, the reason that you drafted them number 1 overall. You don't want to overload them. I tend to think that that's out the window now because of who Ben Johnson is, how intense he is as a coach, and because of what the expectation is that this offense is going to get the most out of Caleb Williams. So Ben going into, presenting himself to these quarterbacks, showing that there's not going to be much room for the slow process, even though it is April 8th. I think that's a good sign that these quarterbacks are going to know. Caleb is going to know what's expected of him right off the jump, and that he's already being challenged day 2. That's among the things that fall in that this is different category for a young quarterback. Because remember last year, Caleb was just, all season long talking about, I want to be challenged. I want to be held accountable. Okay. You got what you asked for. So, we're already starting to see it 2 days into the offseason program that no, they're not easing their way in. They're already trying to challenge the quarterback. And I don't know exactly, like Caleb said, it's very informal. It's not like they're going through and typically on Fridays, a lot of times the quarterback room would do quizzes where I remember, in talking with players about this, whether it was the previous staff that just got fired, whether it was 2 staffs ago, it seemed kind of consistent where Fridays were the day where the quarterback's coach, the offensive coordinator, they would all draw a pop quiz, and there could be pop culture references on it. There could be schematic things. There could be things game plan wise on there, but it was a lot about retention of information. So I don't think it was as intense as that because it wasn't like the formal, sit down, fill it out, whatever. But, Ben going in there trying to pick their brains to see what they've been able to retain in just one day of being together. That's a good gauge for him to know, is my message, is what I'm teaching, is what the coaches are teaching, hitting with the players at a point where they can retain it. And this is something that, is sticking with them. Or do you have to, it's a good way to kind of test yourself as a coach along the way. Are the points that I'm trying to get across to these players sticking? And if not, how do I have to adjust to that? So that's what I would guess would be the biggest takeaway from what Ben Johnson was trying to do with these quarterbacks 2 days into them all being together.
Yeah, I thought what really stood out was the fact that he talked about it almost in a jovial sense, right? In a excited manner of he's not playing around. And the fact that Ben Johnson is saying, listen, I know what day 1 can be. It can be all right, we're going through the process. Yeah, I got to hear the coach. Yep, he's going to introduce himself.
Mm-hmm.
Were you actually listening to what we were saying yesterday? And were you taking notes of different things like that? Those things are important. And we've heard a multitude of players around the league, Hall of Famers even, talk about how important some of those moments where it's it may feel like a nothing day, but if you're not taking notes on that day, that could be the day that you miss something.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that he came out that strong early on. That did get me excited. And then hearing Caleb Williams say that meeting Ben Johnson felt very similar to meeting Lincoln Riley, and just that that Caleb says, I know a vibe when it's there, right? I know what I'm feeling, and I know kind of if I'm going to connect with somebody very early on. It felt very similar to meeting Lincoln Riley for the first time. I thought that was very telling of how Caleb views that this relationship is going to go early on, because you never really know how these things are going to take turns.
Yeah, I think that bringing up the Lincoln Riley thing, the connection, can you sense it right away? Is it going to take time? Is it, are you guys on the same page? Of course, there will be months of the off season spent on terminology, on, limiting the number of voices that are speaking to the quarterback. That was something Ben Johnson was adamant about today or last week when he talked to us about that at owners meetings. But for Caleb to be able to connect with his coach, not just his position coach, not just the offensive coordinator, but the person who's calling the games, the person whose offense he is going to be tasked with running, you really do want to make sure that it is seamless from the start. I know that seems so simple in theory, but even last year, a lot of times, these are the big grand platitudes that these players and these coaches speak in when they're talking about each other. Oh, it's so great. I love him. He's, we're already off on the same, getting off on the same
Getting
page,
off on the right foot.
getting off on the right foot. A lot of that's lip service until it's not. And then it's, oh, well, we're not on the same page. Oh, well, it wasn't great during the off season. You find out that, what was true and what was not. So for Caleb to equate how he felt with the coach that he won a Heisman Trophy under to how he's starting to feel that connection build with Ben Johnson is a sign of something that's different than it was last year. Because I think with Shane Waldron and even with Thomas Brown, like there were some surface level vibes that were put out that would, that came from the quarterback that would lead you to believe, okay, things are going in the right direction. But then you'd see it just never synced up with what the actual product was like on the field. And who knows, like they're in phase one, they're in the beginning of the learning process. So it's classroom work and it's weight room stuff. They're not here for 10 hours a day. Like this truly is the way the NFL ramps you up in the off season, where it's not, some crazy sort of like hours that you're putting in, because it's not designed to be. It's not what the CBA, that's not why they collectively bargained it the way that they did. But this is your chance to get to know the coach that's going to be, tied to you for the better part of his career, better part of your career, if it all works out. And so initial signs of him, acquiescing to Ben Johnson, being like, our connection's going to be key. You pushing me is going to be key, shows that there's a quarterback who's willing and ready to learn and is eager to be the next Jared Goff in that sense. I mean, Caleb talked about it today that, Jared's running that offense to the point that he was in Detroit, where, it's second nature to him. So I think with working with Ben, he saw that benefit for Jared Goff and how that worked out for him. That's what Caleb envisions for himself at some point when this relationship, has the time to marinate and those two get a chance to work together longer and put time on task and truly forge something that when it's crunch time will, for their sake, if it works out, will be able to, come to fruition and be like, okay, this is why we hired Ben Johnson. This is why we paired him with Caleb Williams.
Yeah. And listen, I think that statement there talking about Jared Goff and how he got to that point, right? The fact that Caleb is already envisioning, he said 4 years down the road. You know what I mean? He's already first meeting. Hey, we're going to be together. This is my guy. This is who I'm rolling with. We're going to war together, and we're going to be here for a long time. Like those are the things where those small comments like that, where it's like, okay, the confidence right now in Ben Johnson is very high. The trust in Ben Johnson is very high, and that could come from being a young player, I should say. Where Jaylon Johnson. I love his comments today, and we'll talk more about him coming up. But like, I love his comments where he's like, we'll see." When Caleb's like, "Listen, I trust what Ben is doing. I'm willing to follow the process, and this is going to work 3-4 years down the road." Already being able to think in long terms like that, I think, is beneficial to this relationship working in the long term and in the right now, because those are the things where it's like, okay, I trust where you're going to get us, and I'm willing to go through the process with you.
Yeah, and you want your quarterback to be able to hold on to something, whatever the message being delivered is, whatever is being told to him from his coach, and believe that he's going to get, like, this is the right guy that's tasked with getting the most out of me in my career and setting me up for, the success that Jared Goff had. And I think it, on a very high level, like if you're just looking at this kind of like an overview, Jared Goff went from being a cast-off with the Los Angeles Rams to resurrecting his career under Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams is at a completely different point of his career trajectory in the NFL, but he, talked about like, what does this feel different than last year? And he's like, yeah, it does feel different. And, he mentioned how much time he has on task under his belt, but also within that, the ups and downs that he went through. Like he can acknowledge last year wasn't great. A lot of things were bad last year. He sacked 68 times. He had a lot of issues within the offense that he was supposed to, excel in, or what they envisioned him excelling in. So much so that they fire the offensive coordinator. Then he's having to learn something sort of different on the fly. That is what he believes is going to help him now that he's doing this in his second season, where he feels more empowered as a leader, where he feels like he's got the right teacher in place. Like he kept talking about Ben as somebody who he wants to learn from. Yeah. And that eagerness right now is where it needs to be at April 8th, early on in the offseason, because, you want to make sure that your quarterback feels that he's got the right person to help him, guide him in his career, and that it's not going to be reading from two different playbooks, so to speak. Like he's he's in a good spot, and I think in a good headspace going into this, knowing that, like he said, he's like, I feel as confident as I was coming in as a rookie. Because remember, he was very confident coming in, talking about, I don't feel pressure. I don't get the jitters before
Yeah.
games. And we saw that, there's certainly moments that begged to, that was brought into question. But he said he feels like just as confident as he did as a rookie, if not a little bit more, knowing what this roster's made up of. And that's the answer that you want from a quarterback, not somebody who's like, yeah, I'm just trying to feel it out. Ben and I are going to be feeling it out. Like Caleb was hitting all the right notes, as he typically does in these settings. But if you buy into it and believe it, that means that when May comes around and they're out on the field and we're out there for OTAs, that should look like a much more confident, comfortable quarterback that doesn't feel like he's drinking from a fire hose nearly as much as is expected with rookie quarterbacks, the way it was
Yeah,
last spring.
and I think that goes right into, the conversation that Tremaine Edmunds was having with you guys. By the way, hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Let us know your thoughts on Caleb Williams' comments as we move along here, though. I thought the comments that Tremaine Edmunds made were statements straight from Ben Johnson, which is what we've been hearing. But knowing that he's expressing that to the team, knowing that he's saying we're not here for, like you said, that gap year. We're looking to hit the ground running here, and we're looking to win, and not just win, but win big, dominate a little bit in this first season here. That the message was, we want to win and win now, win by a lot.
Yeah.
Hearing that already, do you feel like that's the right message for Ben Johnson to be putting to this team where this team is at? Is that a little too early? Is that a little bit too premature? Or is that hey, they hired me for a reason, we're going all in?
I don't think it's wrong at all. I really don't, because look at the product that was on the field for 3 seasons when he was the offensive coordinator, especially last year when they were one of the top offenses in the NFL from week 1 through the time that they exited the postseason. They do dominate. They do score a lot of points. If you want to get buy-in and you want to get players to believe that things are going to be different, you have to change what was standard operating procedure for the last year. And that starts because the 2 people you're referencing that talked about, Ben's mentality and how it hit them were veteran players who have heard it from multiple different coaches. Obviously, Tremaine Edmunds in Buffalo heard it from Sean McDermott. He's heard it from Matt Eberflus. Jaylon Johnson heard it from Matt Nagy, Matt Eberflus, and now another coach. I think for an offensive coach to get through to defensive players like that, who are on the other side of trying to stop those high-powered, high-octane offenses, they realize that that's something that can benefit them in a big way. And Ben Johnson isn't bringing in a defensive coordinator in Dennis Allen who's running anything remotely close to what Matt Eberflus had. The amount of man coverage, the amount of it, how much of an attacking mindset this defense is and what's going to be relied upon from the defensive linemen all the way back to the secondary. It's just different than it was. It doesn't feel as passive as it was in previous years. And that's where you get the buy-in from. You don't get buy-in from players when you tell them, yeah, we're going to be a competitive team and we're going to be in the mix. You say, no, we're going to go out there and we're going to dominate. We're going to kick some ass and we're going to score a lot of points and we're going to make our opponent feel like what it's like to play us, that they let you leave an impression on them the way that the Lions did and that offense did all those years that the Bears faced them when Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator. That's how you get through to players. And in speaking with Tremaine Edmunds and Jaylon Johnson specifically, it feels like them as defensive players, as guys who have been captains, that message struck a chord. And that's what you want to be. You want to be on a team that's feared, not just a team that's good and, in the mix. And that's at least what they're aiming to be.
Yeah, and listen, I love the fact that it's not just the Ben Johnson message, right? It is the Tremaine Edmunds and Jaylon talked about it, right? This is the message that Dennis Allen is putting out there. That means that this is the message that the entire coaching staff feels, and I think that speaks to kind of where the roster is. We're talking about all this stuff in the draft that's coming up, and we got to make these players. We got to get these players in here, and this is what's going to put the Bears over the top. It seems like Ben Johnson feels like with a lot of the moves that they've made, it feels like Dennis Allen feels like with a lot of the moves that they've made, we got enough to go out here and get the job done. We got to coach our butts off. You guys got to play your butts off, and we can get the job done with where we're at right now. Of course, additions are going to be made, but I don't think you're making win now statements if you feel like your season is hitching on finding the perfect rookie defensive end or defensive tackle coming in to be the answer on that team.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. Are they a player away at this position? Are they a player away at that position? Like, you can argue, about what they're going to do in the draft, and does that put them over the edge? Does it take them from wherever the floor is for their wins, like 2 wins more, 3 wins more? I don't know. Like, to me, that's such a null and void conversation to have in the offseason, because every team is going through that. But Tremaine Edmunds mentioned it a couple times, the win now mindset. That's being relayed not just from Dennis Allen, but he said that was Ben Johnson's message to the team when he had everybody, not just about wanting to dominate, but like how they're going to do it. And they're a win now team is how they view it. All of the moves, like, you don't make those moves in free agency. You don't go out and flip the interior of your offensive line. You don't go out and bring in a high level defensive tackle depth, maybe like an above average starter in Grady Jarrett, when you already have somebody who you feel confident in at that position at Gervon Dexter. You don't do that if you don't feel like you have a chance to compete this year and be pretty good. You don't do the things that they've done. You have 4 picks in the top 72, and they feel like they've got a chance to add the for now and for later sort of players that give them a chance to compete in a really tough division. But again, this is all like setting the tone and setting the table for how this offseason is going to be. And I honestly hope this is the last time we end up talking about accountability. Probably won't be, but it was such a buzzword last year. And like, so when I asked Jaylon Johnson about that, because that goes into like, Ben Johnson was talking about everything yesterday, from, don't park in this spot, to like long-term goals for the team.
That's where accountability begins, Courtney. Don't take my parking spot.
Caleb said he gave us the do's, the don'ts, and like what to, basically what to expect for the off season. And that's like, setting the precedent is how Caleb described that. It all kind of falls in line with how Ben Johnson has viewed this team and talking with us throughout the couple of meetings we've had with him in the offseason months after he's been hired. But I thought what Jaylon Johnson said about accountability, when you see something, call it out immediately. Like, they keep talking about it. Jaylon Johnson's a captain on this team, or at least he has been in many years past. They've got to start living up to what they expect of themselves and not just talk about it.
No, 100%. And I love that you went into the Jaylon Johnson aspect of it, because to me, what we saw today and yesterday, and it may be small, but that's the one thing that confirms, okay, this guy truly is a leader on the team. When he talked about, I just needed to come in, meet with the coaches, be with the new guys, let them know who I am. That's what leaders do. And one of the things leaving last season was how some of the plays and different things like that ended at the end of the game, right? There's a couple of plays where it seems like Jaylon Johnson took the play off, where they get into the end zone in the last couple of games, right? Where it's like, all right, I don't know if that's a leader on a team. You can't take back everything that happened last season. I'm sure everybody was done. Starting off right now, though, coming in, showing face, meeting the new guys, introducing yourself to Grady Jarrett, introducing yourself to Joe Thuney, Dayo Odengbo, all of these new pieces that are going to be now under you if you are the leader of this defense or a leader on this defense. I thought that was Jaylon Johnson really stepping up, because this is not something you have to be to. This is something where if you are a leader on this team, though, you should be at.
Yeah, and he knows what comes with that. Like, he's been through so many different instances of the leadership of this team changing. And he's kind of been the one constant, especially on defense, to where his voice carries a lot of weight. And for him now, what is he in? Year 5? Year 6?
This is six for Jaylon Johnson, right?
This is, he's in the prime of his career. And I think what he's going to be set up to do in Dennis Allen's scheme, on top of the leadership role that is not just like offered to him within the staff, but going to be required of him,
Yeah.
And he's going to be looked to be that voice in that room. Not just a DB room, but like one of the big voices on defense. He has a huge opportunity ahead of him to really make his mark and hit his stride as somebody who is now not like at the rookie part, not like a rookie, not at the early part of his career, not somebody who's trying to get paid, somebody who is already established. And now within the, what he talked about today with the scheme changes and what he's going to be expected to do in Dennis Allen's scheme, I think you have a reinvigorated, revitalized Jaylon Johnson, who's ready to move past the last couple of years when he was playing in a system that really didn't get to expose his skill set and what he can do best to the degree that he would have wanted to. Now you have your opportunity, kind of like everybody's been talking about accountability, challenge us. All right, you have that in the coaching staff. Now you have a scheme that's going to bring out the most in what you do. If you're Jaylon Johnson, if you're somebody who wants to play a lot of man, if you're somebody who wants the number one versus number one matchup to shadow the number one receiver, like you have your opportunity. How do you seize it?
Well, and on top of all of that, Courtney, right? Like this scheme is going to say whether, hey, you're going to be a part of the future of this Bears team with a new regime here. I think this is a very important season for Jaylon Johnson because yes, he's under contract, but this ain't Matt Eberflus. There's a lot of new faces in here. If Dennis Allen puts you in as the number one and you don't live up to it, does that mean that Dennis Allen wants you as the number one next year? Could there be a trade on the horizon? I love the fact that Jaylon Johnson is taking this whole challenge head on. And he talked about it today, right? The man-to-man. I feel like that fits my skill set. We saw it last year. I think the Minnesota games are the perfect example of it. Whenever Justin Jefferson was on Jaylon Johnson, they weren't really throwing to him. All of a sudden, Justin Jefferson's standing on Tyreek Stevenson. He's getting 4 balls in a row. Like those are the conversations that I think, okay, Jaylon, they didn't throw it to Justin Jefferson in those situations last year. Now you get to follow him around the field. Is it going to be that same result? Can you be that same number one when you're asked to be that guy every single play you're on the field? I think this is going to be a huge season for Jaylon Johnson. I love the fact that he came in ready to live up to those expectations.
Yeah, because attendance is not required at this part of the off season. It's not mandatory mini camp, which for them is June 3 through 5. Yeah. Technically, you don't have to be here. Of course, it's voluntary in name only, because we talk about the guys who don't show up for the off-season program more than we do a lot of times the guys who are there, who are going through phase 1 through phase 3. So I think for Jaylon to be here, he said it was to make good impressions. First and foremost, he wants to meet people, look people in the eye, get to see his teammates, see his coaches, and it was a respect thing for him. But if you expect to have a much different role and a better role in this defense, you might want to be here for the offseason, which I think it's just like it's a no-brainer for him. Like, I want to learn this defense. I want to see what Dennis Allen has in store for me as far as being the number one corner who's going to be shadowing and traveling, with top receivers on defense. And he said, you pointed out, like he feels like it's going to, this is the best part of his skill set. This is what he trains for. It's why he works hard. This is where, if you're the Bears, you're going to be getting that $70+ million return if he's that player, if he can fit this defense and be that type of player that you want. Like, I think Tyreek Stevenson's going to have a very good year 3 in DA's scheme because of how he plays. I think this is going to fit his skill set, maybe even more than Jaylon Johnson, because we know Jaylon Johnson can do this. It's just being able to see Tyreek Stevenson, who's still a young player, get into a system that gets the most out of him as a second-round pick when he's not going to be too far off from getting paid one day. Like, he's got to be feeling pretty good about what his matchups are going to look like and what's going to be asked of him in the back end of this defense.
Yeah, listen, that is the thing too, right? Like Tyreek Stevenson was great against some of those number 2 options out there, and that's really where he looked like he shined at. But a lot of times when you got that number 1 guy, right, Nico Collins down in Houston, right? Like when you got the Justin Jeffersons on him, it was like, are you not there yet? Not to say he can't get there, but listen, those are the best guys that were in the league at that wide receiver position this year. There was a reason that they were matching them up on Tyreek Stevenson. I think this kind of scheme is going to really speak to accentuate the things that Tyreek is really good at. I agree with you. I think that with Al Harris working with him this season, he's going to be able to get the most out of Tyreek. And the only thing, let's be real, Tyreek's a good DB. The only thing that irritates us at times is the bonehead moves, the after the play stuff, the extracurricular activities, if you will, taunting the fans and then running in, being out of position, not even playing your spot on the ball, and then tipping the ball into somebody's hands, getting a stupid after the play penalty because you want to chirp with the wide receiver and don't know where that line is of, hey, don't smack them upside the head. Those are the things that I think get corrected this season. I think Tyreek takes a big step. I think even Jaylon takes a big step in kind of, because the one thing I was looking for last season was, hey, the accountability has to be you telling him in that moment, you can't do that. We can't call for accountability and not be willing to hold other people accountable in the building. It felt like that wasn't there last season. That's where I think, right, I love how Jaylon pointed this out. It's not just accountability and telling me, Jaylon, you need to cover better. You got to be on your P's and Q's as well. You have to be about it. You have to show me where I'm messing up. I love that about Jaylon Johnson. I think that's going to be something that Al Harris and Ben Johnson and Dennis Allen are all really going to bring to the table as well.
Yeah, it's like the accountability part for a player who has talked about accountability a lot. I feel like he's going to be insulated in a place that's going to hold him accountable to the degree that he feels is going to bring out the best in him. Just like Caleb's talked about with wanting to be challenged. I think Jaylon Johnson, he's 6 years into this, but he still feels like there's untapped potential within himself. Like he knows he's one of the best corners in the NFL, but like to still feel like you have another gear that you could get to. It's good to have goals and it's good to have things that drive you so you don't get stagnant. And that's kind of the vibe that I got from him about how he views this situation and like what this opportunity this defense presents for him.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see what the Bears end up doing. Was there anything else that we heard today that you felt really kind of stood out to you? I mean, Darnell Wright, I love Darnell. He didn't have much to say. He's just like, they put me up here. I'm gonna be up here. I guess this is what we're getting. Here we go.
Yeah, I think him talking about like the consistency element, within the offensive line. Obviously, he's the first offensive lineman we've heard from since they brought in outside of like Joe Thuney, Drew Dahlman, and Jonah Jackson. He's the first Bears offensive lineman we've heard speak publicly about the additions that they've made. And, it's, he's in year 3. And I think the growing pains and the learning curve that he's gone through his first 2 seasons puts him in a spot to where like even he gets weirded out by the whole, like, am I a veteran? Am I not? I still feel like I'm learning. Like there's not everybody just feels like, all right, I've been here 3 years. I'm the man now. Like, I think for him, he was very honest about it's not something he's completely comfortable yet, but he wants to get there. And the more time on task he has with this line and the consistency that they're trying to build is only going to make him a better player. Like I asked him, just because you have to, given all of the draft conversation, all of the thoughts about Braxton Jones, when is he going to be ready? He said that they have not talked about him moving to right tackle. We'll see.
Left tackle,
excuse me. Yeah, we'll see, because I personally am of the belief that you don't move players out of position. And even the way that Ryan Poles talked about Jonah Jackson, like, well, why did he struggle last year? Oh, well, he's playing out of position. Okay. So that logic would lead you to believe they're not going to be moving anybody out of position, but there is some thought about like guys that are in the draft. If they went tackle at 10, like maybe they would want to experiment with moving Darnell Wright over to a different side and then like start a rookie. Like, doesn't sound like it's happening. Very early in the process, but does not sound like it's happening. I think for Darnell, even like he's a man of few words, and it's not like media. He does not seek out talking with us. He doesn't want to be in front of, an audience. And he even mentioned like he gets nervous when he goes up to the podium. I thought he handled himself really well today. I think he showed some personality. I think in talking about Penei Sewell and knowing like that's kind of the benchmark of what you want to hit if you're a right tackle in the NFL. I think he's in a good spot. And I think that for him going into this 3rd season where Braxton Jones is not fully healthy and won't be fully healthy for the start of camp, like at least one side of your line is pretty much is set and solid. And that's, for him, I think a big credit to the work that he's put in these last 2 seasons to prove that he, is living up to his draft slot as the 10th overall pick.
Yeah, the my favorite part is I think it was Hogue ended up asking him like, "Do you plan on throwing the football at all, or do you plan on playing, quarterback?" And he's like, "I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe. My arm's terrible though, but maybe." Like what? Like it was there was personality there, and my favorite part about Darnell Wright is just like when he's on the field, he's it's a completely different
sure.
personality. Like I think a lot of offensive linemen, Joe Tooney, when Joe Tooney started off here in his first press conference. I was like, the last thing he wants to be doing right now is talking to us on a microphone right now. Like he is so ready to be off of the stage and just go hit some people. So I think Darnell is going to be this season is going to be big for him, especially having Jonah Jackson next to him in the run game, especially kind of what we asked for in that Tevin Jenkins mix. I think we're going to get with that Jonah Jackson, Darnell Wright mix on the right side of just that road grader running the football. And I hope that that is something that leads the way to making DeAndre Swift worth $8 million. He didn't deserve that shot. We're going to get up out of here, though. Appreciate Courtney Cronin, as always, for coming on and joining the show. We have a ton more Bears coverage coming you guys' way every single day here on ESPN 1000. Of course, here on the Chicago Bears podcast. Make sure that you hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. For Courtney Cronin, it is your boy, Pat the Designer, back at it again. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. One love. Peace.